The Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, carried out its first armed attack in 1984 in pursuit of an independent Kurdish state. 42 years later, it is preparing to lay down its weapons for good. As a journalist, I want to understand how the PKK arrived at this moment and how it's preparing for peace. To reach the organization's camps in the Qandil Mountains on the border between Iran and Iraq, I set out from Istanbul on a 2,000-kilometer drive. My first stop, my hometown, Hakkari. This is where the PKK launched its first armed attack on August 15, 1984, in its bid to build an independent Kurdish state, which makes Hakkari a place of real significance. Residents of Hakkari, whose lives have been intertwined with the PKK's for 42 years, approach the process with skepticism, but they're pleased that the guns are falling silent and military pressure is coming to an end. But young women in particular fear something else, that without the PKK, which they credit with driving real social change around women's freedom, conservative attitudes could make a comeback. So, what do the PKK fighters still in the mountains make of all this? On July 30th, I arrived in the Qandil Mountains under tight security. The villagers had withdrawn for their midday rest, and the area was extremely deserted. After a long trek along narrow mountain paths, far from any village, I reach a massive cave carved beneath the mountain with extraordinary engineering. The first person I see there is Nurettin Demirtaş, a man I interviewed at length 19 years ago, in 2007. Over the next intense 3 days, filled with long conversations and long walks, I get to know Nurettin Demirtaş, one of the organization's key figures. Like his brother Selahattin Demirtaş, his life has been shaped by the heavy price of being a Kurdish politician in Turkey. In the early 1990s, while still a student at Muğla University, Nurettin Demirtaş was arrested on allegations that he was a member of the PKK's youth wing. He served 11 years and 6 months in prison. After his release in 2007, he was elected co-chair of the Democratic Society Party, at the time Turkey's largest Kurdish political party. But at a time when Turkey, pursuing EU membership, claimed to be seeking a democratic solution to the Kurdish question, Demirtaş became a target for the government. He was soon detained on grounds that he had not performed his military service, spent nearly another year in prison, and then was forcibly conscripted. After completing his compulsory military service, Demirtaş went to the Qandil Mountains in 2007 and joined the PKK. Around the same time, his brother, Selahattin Demirtaş, was beginning to make his mark in the Democratic Society Party, the same party where his brother had been unable to pursue democratic politics. By the 2010s, Selahattin Demirtaş had become Turkey's most influential Kurdish politician, but he would share his brother's fate and end up in prison as well.
Tüm barıştan ve kardeşlikten yana
While Nurettin Demirtaş spent more than 12 years in prison, his brother Selahattin served as the HDP party's co-chair. On June 7, 2015, the HDP won 13% of the vote and sent 80 members to parliament. But on November 4, 2016, following the collapse of the 2013-2015 PKK Turkey peace talks, Selahattin was arrested and he remains in prison to this day.
AKP'nin tehlikeli yaklaşımı tezkere ile birlikte Türk ve Kürt halkının tarihsel kardeşlik bağlarını kopararak coğrafyamızı kapsayacak tehlikeli bir savaş sürecine yönelmektedir. Kongremiz tezkere ile başlayan Kürtlere ve kurumlarına yönelik linç girişimlerini ülkemizdeki ve sınır ötesine yönelik operasyonlar ileride daha iyi açığa çıkacaktır ama şunu hiçbir zaman unutmamak gerekiyor ki devletlerin ne söylediğinden daha çok halkların direnişimiz sonucu belirleyecektir.
In our long conversations in the Qandil Mountains, Nurettin Demirtaş reminds me that a year ago, in a symbolic weapons burning ceremony, they renounced armed struggle. But he says that once they laid their weapons down, their burden only grew heavier. I remind Demirtaş that his organization embraced armed struggle as its path to liberation from the 1980s onwards, and ask why they are now abandoning that path entirely. Demirtaş tells me that their leader, Abdullah Öcalan, had already wanted to abandon armed struggle back in the late 1980s, 35 years ago, but could find no political counterpart in Turkey willing to engage. He answers. I asked Demirtaş, so what did you actually gain through armed struggle that you're now giving up this method?
Temmuz 2025'te
On July 11, 2025, a delegation of 30 people symbolically burned their weapons. In effect, this meant the PKK had ended its armed struggle, laying down its weapons, taking them off its shoulders. So, has laying down those weapons made your burden heavier or lighter? What do you feel?
Sizin yükünüzü arttırdı mı, azalttı mı? Ne hissediyorsunuz?
Doğrusu bu
Honestly, this isn't really a question of burden. It's a question of responsibility. A genuine responsibility toward the people, towards society. Given the stage we've reached, the gains made over 50 years of struggle, the level of consciousness our society has achieved, and the level of organization we ourselves have reached, all of this made it necessary to end the armed struggle and place democratic struggle at the center. That was the resolve behind this decision, rather than calling it relief from a burden. Let's not describe it that way, because an enormous struggle was waged. It was, of course, a great responsibility. Carrying that responsibility into a new phase, into a new position, where given the circumstances we can be more effective, that naturally brought new responsibilities with it. So yeah, has our burden increased? It has. It isn't easy. This process has shown all of us that the struggle for peace is harder than war. We knew from the start this wouldn't be easy. We have a cause and we will continue to pursue it. In other words, we have taken on a great responsibility. Our burden hasn't lessened, it has grown.
Bir muhatap arıyorum. Bir muhatap arıyorum, evet.
He first used that phrase, I am looking for a counterpart during 1993 ceasefire. I am looking for a counterpart for peace. But to this day, no such counterpart has emerged. Several times people came forward claiming they wanted to be that counterpart. What happened next is well known. There were purges, assassinations. Every one of those processes ended in failure. So this has a 35-year history. Those who think we are only talking about this for the first time today are mistaken. They are speaking without any knowledge of our history. But if the argument is nothing has been gained, so why lay down arms? Well, first of all, weapons were never a means of achieving gains. That needs to be understood. Weapons truly emerged as a means of self-defense. After the conditions of September 12th, the atrocities in Diyarbakir prison, the violence that September 12 fascism inflicted on the people, the massacres, weapons emerged as a means of self-defense. They were never seen as a means of claiming rights. They were always regarded as a means of self-defense. So the debate over whether something can be achieved through arm is, on principle, a debate that has nothing to do with us. We have always said, as a matter of principle, that weapons can be seen as a means of defense. This movement has viewed weapons that way from the very beginning. So, if the essential aim is to secure the rights of human life, of social life, we always said, even while using weapons, that this can only be achieved through democratic struggle, not through arms. Let's look at the results of 50 years of struggle. Wasn't there a Kurdish reality whose very name, whose very existence was denied, entirely erased? There was. People couldn't even say, I am Kurdish. There was a reality in which people were insulted, humiliated, tortured, simply for saying that. Wasn't there a reality of people ashamed of themselves, running from themselves? No, millions of people proudly say, I'm Kurdish. Because a people who were suppressed, humiliated, oppressed, denied, subjected to genocide, organized themselves, and have now reached the point where they can proudly say, I exist. Is there a greater achievement than that? Consciousness has advanced. The cultural gains are immense. Women's freedom within Kurdish society is now an inspiration to the entire world, humanity. Those who look at all this through a statist, power-driven lens, without ever seeing these gains, who think this struggle should have ended with us holding power, with a state of our own, yes, they may look at the outcome and see no gains at all. But those who approach the question humanly, socially, will absolutely see a great deal.
Ama insani olarak bakanlar, toplumsal olarak bakanlar kesinlikle çok şey görecektir.
Over my 3 days in the Qandil Mountains, most of the fighters I meet are in their 20s and 30s. Some joined the organization only a few years ago. They went to the mountains believing that the conditions for political activity in Turkey, until very recently, did not exist. Which makes me wonder whether these young people now want to come down from the mountains. The fighters in Qandil are well aware that the current peace talks won't, on their own, bring democracy to Turkey. But they believe the process will open up space for the struggle for democracy to continue. For them, these talks are not an ending. They're the start of a new struggle. After 3 days with them, I leave Qandil. One guerrilla fighter presses a small necklace, carved from cave stone, into my palm. Maybe next time we'll meet in Ankara or Diyarbakir, she says. You can read the full account of my 3 days in the Qandil Mountains on the Amargi's website.